Planning Commission. And first, we will open our, approve our minutes. So, do I have a motion from somebody on the Planning Commission to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Josh,
And I'll second it.
second by Randy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We are going to follow a procedure tonight where Sean is going to take over the public hearing, and then after the hearing, it'll be closed, and then I'll take over again as the Planning Commission to make our recommendation to the council. So with that,
And then there was some,
oh yeah,
our hearing's technically set at 6:05, so we can't call it to order yet, but housekeeping notes while we wait. There was a comment, if you look in the agenda, there was discussion about whether the council would vote tonight. I think in checking with Bill Spooner, we technically could, but again, I reiterate that I don't think we should, and Bill's advice to us as well was that it would not, generally not be appropriate, as that wasn't marked on the agenda, that the council would be acting on this. So this is a planning board meeting. Planning board will make a recommendation to the council, and then that recommendation will come before the council in due course, as though we had not done this as a joint meeting. I understand Jean's not going to be there because she's going to be doing something more exciting.
to the next council meeting.
Yeah, to the next council meeting.
That's true.
So it's,
You can read the,
yeah, I'll wait until we open it, just in case there are more people here. The procedure of the public meeting, our order of business is going to be opened. There will be a staff presentation. Normally that would be done by Jennifer Welling. She's dealing with a family emergency tonight, so I will make some comments. Tarek can fill in, and then we'll open it up to public comments. There will be more on that once we get going. We're here to answer questions if necessary, then we'll do some follow-up if we need to, and then adjourn the public hearing and go back into the business meeting. So, I don't know if you have anything else, Jean, while we're waiting for the clock to pass.
we got informational, we could go through our informational.
There you go.
We have building permit reports. Is there anything to add, Brad?
So there was a comment about some of the permits from 2020, they're getting old, and I understand that. I did call them this month. So Nate Rindall's permits, 639 Washburn Avenue. He's working full-time, he's got grown kids, he's busy, he's running, I understand that. So I gave him a little leeway. It's nearly finished, he's just got a little bit to go, he'll be done this summer. Another one was the Wensman, it's a basement remodel. He's waiting on electrical parts, he can't get some fittings to get his electrical final done, so I don't want to final him until his electrical final is complete. And then there's a garage on Kieran Lane, that's, there again, he works full-time, he's doing it himself. So I give him a little leeway that way.
And then we just have if anybody have any questions for Brad? Okay, same reports we get every month. And then we have a newsletter from the CCLD review. That's all we have in our informational. And then our next meeting next month is, it's not on our calendar, but it's July 17th, I think. Nope, it's a Monday, 17th. Yeah, 17th.
Yeah, your third Monday next month will be the 17th.
Yeah,
Yep, 6 p.m.
that's what I thought. She usually puts it on our agenda. That's all I have right now.
I'll give it just a few more seconds before formally opening it, but I think we probably have everyone here. Brad, would you be willing to grab the sign-in sheet for me, please?
Absolutely.
You have an extra pen?
Yeah? I think I have all that.
Plenty.
My clock says 6:05 now, so Gene, I assume you're handing it over to me?
I am.
Okay. Right, we'll open up our public hearing, just go through some of the public hearing guidelines that the council approved back in April, our last public hearing. Right. So I just want to say thank you for taking your time to share your thoughts with us and the planning board. We appreciate hearing from all of our residents to help guide us as we decide the issues that affect all of us. To help us maintain decorum and encourage participation by all and those who want to participate, we ask that you please sign in. You speak only from the podium, and that's because we need to hear you on the microphone. We have somebody in the back, staff, who are taking minutes of tonight's meeting. In order for her to hear everything, you need to be at the microphone, otherwise things get lost. We ask that you state your name and your address slowly when you first start speaking. One, it helps make sure that the minutes accurately reflect who was talking, but two, starting out actually helps you slow down a little bit. Sometimes when we're speaking in public, we get worked up. So if we start with the name and address, it helps us take a little bit of a break as we start slowly there. We ask that we limit our comments to 3 minutes or less. I'll sort of give you a little bit of a notice when we're getting close to that 3-minute mark. It's not because we're trying to be rude or cut you off, it's just that we want to make sure that we can hear from everyone without being here until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. At the end of your comments, I will thank you for your comments. There's not going to be a back and forth between the council and the board and the people speaking. We will listen to you, we will take notes as necessary, but know that if we don't respond to your comments immediately, it's not that we're not paying attention to you, we're going to move on to the next speaker. We will keep a list of questions that are asked during the comment period and try to answer all of those at the end. Because we're human, if we make a mistake, feel free to ask us to repeat it, but we will try and answer them. Depending on the time and number of people that are here, we may or may not respond to things immediately, which I said already. Again, these guidelines are here to facilitate the meeting so that everyone can be heard. It's not meant to disregard what you're saying. We're going to start. I will make some comments on why we're here. Usually that would be done by our staff person. Our zoning official is Jennifer Welling. She's dealing with a family emergency today, so she's not able to be here. So I'll make some comments and then Tarek will fill in. Tarek's our city administrator, for those who don't know. We'll then open it up for the public comment period. I have a list of people who've signed in. I'm probably going to call people up just in the order that they're signed in here. Again, it's just so that we can hear from everyone in some sort of an organized fashion. Afterwards, we will follow up and answer questions. If there's more, we have 10 minutes allotted for follow-up questions or comments from people who wish to speak again. And then after everyone's been heard that wants to speak, we will adjourn the public hearing, and then the planning board will resume its business there. So the issue being discussed tonight is an amendment to our zoning ordinance. In simple terms, what it does is it amends the height of structures within the city, specifically within the I-1 and I-2 areas.
I-2 only.
Thank you. Yes, the I-2 only. To increase the height of silos up to 90 feet and the height of buildings up to
75.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't see it in front of me. I didn't want to say it wrong. Thanks, Gene. Up to 75 feet for buildings.
Silos will be going to 100.
Yeah, silos are going to be 100.
Thanks, Bill. This is why I'm glad you're here.
I was going to correct you too.
Right. Why did this come up is a question that's been often asked. The council members of the council spent the better part of, what, Bill, 7 years working on a revised zoning ordinance. And during the time that was happening, we were passing variance after variance after variance, knowing that our zoning ordinance was out of date and we needed to get it brought up to modern standards. Since that time, we've had at least one residential person come before us asking for a variance on their building. The city council denied that because they could not meet the variance requirements. The city council said it makes sense for what you're doing, and we amended our ordinance. Because if you look at our zoning ordinance, it's thick. It's well over 100 pages, if I remember correctly. And while we tried to update it, there are things that slip through because you don't think about it until it's before you. And one of the other things that has come up is we've been talking with AMPI, and yes, Nature Energy is also one of the companies, but AMPI is looking at adding silos and buildings to their facility as well. We just met with them last week on their need for higher buildings. So the council looked at it knowing that our position is that unless we can meet the specific requirements for a variance, our position on variances is no. And that's something that the council's been talking about for years. That's the advice of our city attorney, our building officials, zoning officials. Follow the law on variance granting. So we're looking at the zoning ordinance, realizing that if there's a need for taller buildings to fit those that are here and to help encourage more that might want to come, then we should look at amending the ordinance to suit that need. So that's why we are here looking at this ordinance tonight. TARC did a little bit of research on some of the other cities around here, and I'll sort of present that in summary, but he can do it in more detail if he needs to. A number of cities, Albany, Avon, Belgrade, Rockville, St. Augusta, all have heights of 35 feet. Annandale, Kimball, Litchfield, Melrose are at 40. Painesville's currently at 45, along with Eden Valley, Waite Park, and Painesville Township. TARC noted that Waite Park is currently in the process of removing their height limits. The question I have for you, TARC, when I turn it over is, are they amending to go higher, or are they taking them off completely?
Taken off completely.
Okay, Spicer is at 60. Cold Spring varies between 30 to 75. Sauk Center is at 80. Benson is at 85. So that's where we are, why we're looking at a zoning ordinance. Again, this is not set for any one particular business. I won't assume that people are dumb and think that Nature Energy didn't have something to do with this coming forward, but it is here and it is something that would come forward at some point regardless of whether they were coming or not. Because this is something that in order to work with and address the needs of AMPI currently and along their 5 and 10, 20-year plan, we would need to look at this. So with that, turn it over to TARC if you have anything to add on why we're here tonight.
No, I just want to add that, in doing this also, we're trying to be comparative with the communities around us. And when I asked these cities that have either the same height or a lower height than us, I said, well, what do you do when a company asks for a higher building height? They just said, well, we issue a variance. And that was consistent throughout the cities that I spoke with. So since I've been here, we've been trying to stress that we're trying to move away from giving variances, and we'd like to have an ordinance that meets the requirements of the city and also be a place that is attractive for companies to want to locate and actually expand, because this also benefits existing businesses, as Sean mentioned. It's also important to know that when I was asking around the other communities, I was focusing on building heights, and I know there were a couple of comments made about other structures such as smokestacks, movie theater screens, and other structures, television towers. We are consistent with what other cities have for ordinances, and I think Brad maybe can give more detail on that, but that is always kept separate. We're talking specifically building height, not smokestack height or not tower height or any of these heights. Those are separate. And I think that is also, and maybe Bill, you can attest to that too, but that's separate from buildings. So that's it.
Thank you. So then with that, I will open up the public comment period. One note that I forgot to make when we started is that as we're speaking, again, use the microphone, please, but then also try and remember one person speaking at a time, and that goes to people watching and members of the board and council as well. Sometimes we can be like herding wild cats up here, so just asking the council to speak one at a time. Otherwise, Kristen can't hear us because the microphone's cut out in the back. So again, it's just making sure that we have accurate minutes, not trying to cut anyone off. So with that, I get Nathan Bork. You are the first on my list, sir. If you still want to speak to us, I'd ask that you step up to the podium, please. And again, just ask you to state your name and address. I've got it here, but just making sure it's accurate. And then we'll let you go.
Hello, my name is Nathan Bork. My address is 275 Industrial Loop Street, and unknown County Road 33. My property borders the property that this plant is proposed to be built on two sides. That's why I'm here. A little background, I'm trying to get it under 3 minutes. When I went to the Blandon Foundation's retreat, they told us about how there's 9 kind of critical areas of a community to have a healthy community. And those involve spiritual wellness, or spirituality and wellness, lifelong learning, inclusion, recreational, artistic opportunity, environmental stewardship, infrastructure services, community leadership, economic opportunity, and safety and security. And I'm going to talk about a lot of those because a lot of what's being proposed is violating much of that. The first one is, unbeknownst to me that this is even happening, I didn't get any notification as a neighbor to this property that there's a big plant being proposed, and it might involve toxins in a river upstream from my garden, or explosive hazards within very close range. So my education, if anyone doesn't know, I was pretty much at the top of my class all the way through Paynesville High School. Went to the Navy into the nuclear power field, and then went to the Naval Academy for electrical engineering, where I studied a lot of math, science, string theory, all kinds of stuff back in '99. I know a lot about nuclear explosions and also other explosives. And from what I read in this is there are multiple byproducts or products that they're making with this. Let's see, nitrous oxide. That's not necessarily explosive until a certain temperature, but also is it's odorless, colorless. It takes away oxygen, kind of like CO2 would, and it's also what they call laughing gas. Another one is phosphate. Phosphate, or white phosphorus, phosphates were used in Vietnam for explosives and used for lighting up big areas. I mean, very extremely explosive, just when exposed to air. And potassium, that's the letter K on that periodic table. That's also an extreme explosive. So I tend to go off the premise that I was woken up when I was born, and that I want to define something about the word woke that everyone's talking about.
And then I would just ask to keep in mind that we're at the 3 minutes. So I'll let you finish, but I just wanted you to be aware of it.
Knowing about stuff, knowing is, and being knowledgeable is what woke means. It means education on what we're doing here. Another thing, methane gas, very dangerous. So what I would like to point out lastly is, well, a couple of questions I have for the council. First of all, who went to Denmark? Okay. And, because I read, they've been whining and dining other towns to go do the smell test, and from what I know is when you get off an airplane, your nose doesn't work very good for a couple days. That's just science. So that's kind of legal notifications. What is the legal requirement for notifying adjacent property owners of such kind of projects? That's another question. Also, how involved is the Biden administration with working with Shell and trying to push these plants around the country producing chemicals that can be used in war?
Thank you, Nathan.
Another big question.
Great. Thank you.
And also, when are you going to get rid of fluoride out of the water system? Because that's a byproduct of making nuclear, like uranium and stuff. That's going to be poison.
Thank you. I've got your questions written down. I want to just address a couple of things here from a procedural standpoint, and that is regarding the status of the Nature Energy facility. So Nature Energy has not broken ground. They have not received city approval to operate. Whatever vote comes out of this meeting tonight will not give Nature Energy approval to operate. So if the height variance is granted, that would mean that they could build up to the 75-foot buildings and 100 feet in terms of silos, but it would not give them operating clearance. That is totally and completely separate from this hearing. This hearing is about the zoning ordinance, the procedure on what would happen if Nature Energy does choose to develop. So currently, they are looking at purchasing the property north of town, known as the Furchy property colloquially. If that purchase were to go through, the next step would be to rezone that property in order to fit the industrial needs. There would be public hearings on that as to whether or not the land would be rezoned, and if so, to what. From there, Nature Energy still has to get MPCA clearance. They have to work with a number of regulatory bodies, including probably the DNR, and I don't want to say definitively what they have to work with, but they have to work with the number, MPCA being the biggest one of them. Once they get the MPCA clearance to operate, then they come to the city for a conditional use permit. And that conditional use permit is the green light. That's where if the city council votes to approve, they would have operating clearance within the city. And the conditional use permitting process would include anything from ensuring that there's appropriate roads for trucks to travel through the area without disrupting the downtown traffic, ensuring things like smell mitigation are addressed and things like that. But that's the conditional use permitting process. And that process, by my estimates, conservatively, is 8 to 12 months out from here. I could be wrong, they could get things pushed through the MPCA faster, but again, we still have a platting process for the land. That's 6 months. That's approximately 6 months at a minimum. That needs to be rezoned, needs to go through MPCA, and then it needs to come here. So again, I'll listen to all of the comments, we'll listen to it, but again, tonight's hearing is on the height variance. So I understand that there might be some strong feelings about Nature Energy. Absolutely, we're going to have these conversations, but keep in mind that this is about the height variance. It's not about Nature Energy specifically. This can absolutely go through, and Nature Energy might get a no-go 10 months, 12 months from now. So that's just a statement there. Right, as I look through, next on my list, Katie Wesson, you wanted to speak. Katie, do you want to speak as a member of the public, or just wait and speak as part of the planning board when we're done?
I will wait, that way the public can have the time to speak.
Right, then the only other person I've listed here wanting to speak is Mr. Alan Bear. Alan, if you wouldn't mind.
Good evening, Alan Bear, 26896 East Highway 55, Paynesville Township. So this meeting caught my attention due to the building height. I have a sensitivity on building height, a little bit on my background. I come from the Lake Minnetonka area. And on Lake Minnetonka, you know, I've owned lake property a lot of my life. When we moved to Paynesville, we bought the parcel that I presently own with approximately 1,200 foot of lakeshore. Owning that amount of lakeshore, I'm concerned about what dominates the skyline of my town. Specifically, does the Paynesville City Council have a vision as we change these height provisions of what type of city we're going to be going forward? Are we a lake community? Are we an industrial community? Are we a recreational community? Are we a farming community? Have we defined that, and have we thought about, as we look to bring developments and different types of industry to our town, are they fitting with one type of unified vision that aesthetically creates an environment where people want to be and benefits their well-being, as Mr. Bork brought up in his first speech? And lakeshore living, where I come from, there's a lot of lawsuits that result from buildings being built in such a manner that they block other people's view of skyline, water rights, etc. And also, as we look at those things, my next question that pops up is what we do and what decisions we make within the confines of this council and within these hearings establishes what the taxable value for the foreseeable future is going to be for the property owners within Paynesville. We get the job done properly, the people of Painesville win. They have a vibrant community that grows property values and people thrive. We get the equation wrong and we harm the city of Painesville, we harm its future prospects, and we harm the people that have been here for generations. So we have to look at that. And as we look at going up and height the buildings, one of the questions that stands out in my mind the most, so here's another question I'll throw at you, is are our police and fire departments equipped to deal with the larger structures? Coming from a metropolitan area, as you go up in height, you require additional resources in terms of infrastructure support, power, water, sewer, gas, but you also require additional resources in terms of what resources the fire department has to work with that taller structure. We require additional policing because if we're going to get into residential structures that are taller, then we increase population density, which brings a whole host of other issues with it, because then we need to talk about more policing, more different things to support the community. So in this discussion of height and buildings, I think it can lead down a lot of different ways, and I just want to bring up these issues. I did a little bit of quick math. If we were at 100 feet, and I know you stated it was for silos and for various appurtenant structures, I don't think we're talking about apartment buildings or multi-unit dwellings at this point. But as we look at those things, you know, that's a road we need to go down and have a lot of discussion, because it opens the door for other things within this city. And I think we need a unified vision and a definition of where those things are going to create a better understanding.
All right,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Great. Those were the two that I have on my list of speakers here that wanted to speak. I know there were a couple of people who came in after I called the meeting to order, so I don't have your names. Did anybody else want to speak before I? Okay. I did get a couple of letters in advance from people who could not make them, so I will read those. First one is dated June 28th, 2023. Letter in regards to ordinance number 43. Mr. Mayor, City Council and Planning Commission. While I would like to be at the meeting in person on Thursday, 6/29, I cannot be. I would like to ask those voting to vote no regarding the change to the ordinance number 43. I have asked a couple planning/council members how many changes to the height ordinance have been requested in a year. I have not received an answer. I was told it was at the advice of the city attorney. I still would like to know the answer, which should be the reason to change it. Facts and number to support a proposed change are important. I see the new ordinance as a blank slate for the proposed zone I-2 when there is no limitation for chimneys, air conditioning, or HVAC, drive-in movie theater screens, smokestacks, water towers, radio or TV towers, antennas, monuments, cupolas, flagpoles, radio or cell towers, steeples, and mechanical appurtenances pertaining to and necessary to the permitted use of a district in which they are located. Every structure, building, or any of the above items listed over the current ordinance heights should go through an ordinance variance official request as they do today. Please vote no on this ordinance change. And that's signed Barb Schmidt, who lives at 14839 Linden Hill Drive in Painesville. Second letter we received is dated today, June 29th. Dear Mr. Mayor, City Council and Planning Commission, unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the City Council meeting tonight in person, but do have a question. First, I would like to ask that those voting would vote no to changing Ordinance 43 at this time. I see the new ordinance is essentially a blank slate for proposed Zone 1 and 2, where there are no height limitations for chimneys, air conditioning, drive-in movie theater screens, smokestacks, water tower, water, radio, or TV towers, antennas, monuments, flagpoles, steeples, and mechanical appurtenances pertaining to and necessary to the permitted use of a district in which they are located. I feel every structure should go through an ordinance variance official request, as they currently do. Having said that, I would like to ask, what is the identity of Painesville as the City Council sees it? Are we a lake resort town, an industrial wasteland, a farming community, or some sort of hybrid? And how is this proposed ordinance change supporting this vision? Please vote no on this ordinance change. Respectfully, Liz Lahr, who lives at 15644 Old Lake Road in the city of Paynesville, or Paynesville Township technically. Right, so we are there. Said we'd give everyone 3 minutes and then we'd circle back. We only had 2 people sign up to speak, so I'm okay before we get into some answering questions part, if anybody else wants to make some comments or anything before we go. Steve, sir, if you want to, I just ask again that you go up to the podium and give us your name and address, please.
Joe Miller, 112 Lake Avenue North, Paynesville here. Something's occurred to me as I'm listening. Alan was talking about a blanket policy of heights. Tark said that all these other towns make a variance as needed. That way there's some common sense going into it. I don't think we need a blanket policy at this time. If AMPI needs a variant, okay. If this thing goes through, they can apply for a variant, but if all these other towns are living with variants and getting by with it, that's what we have you people here for. I believe that we should truly leave this, important decisions like this, up to variances.
All right, thank you, Joe. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll start answering some. Yeah, feel free to go ahead.
Hello, my name is Justin Hoppy. I live at 117 Central Avenue. I moved here in 2019, but I'm originally from the Freeport area and went to school in Melrose, and I heard you mention the height limits that they have in Melrose and in Albany. Growing up in Melrose, they never had an issue with the town growing, with companies coming in, and even in Albany, you look at those towns that have been growing rapidly in the last couple of years, and like you said, they have variants that they apply for. So I have a question as to who is asking for the height limit to be increased? Is it just AMPI? Is it Conoco that wants to do something as well? Is then, if that's the case, again, just do a variance there. You don't need this blanket policy to open up what multiple other people have said to ruin the skyline and basically destroy the city. So that's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you. Yeah. Right.
No, I
Yeah.
I wasn't going to, but sorry. I'm Rob Voiseth, a longtime resident on Rice Lake, 24836 Crescent View Road over on Rice Lake. I think there's a lot of chatter in the community on social media, and I'm a teacher. I've taught overseas for a long time, and I've Googled the plant and the issues. I think if you guys were proactive and put out some good data on why this plant would be good for our community and the good things about it and the negative things about it, I think you'd be ahead of the game. And I liked your timeline of the year that these steps are gonna happen. I think you put that out there, and that would really help all of us get on board or get whatever we're gonna get behind this project. For me personally, it feels like it's really close to the river, right? We've got 40 truckloads of manure, and they're gonna be within 100 yards of the Crow River, which flows into Rice Lake, which flows into Coronas Lake. It just feels really close when we've got all this other land in our community that would be an interesting spot for this project. And it is interesting, to get this manure and to turn it into methane and put it into our gas line. It does feel like green energy, which we could all get behind. But I think that if you guys, and you do a nice job on Facebook, but if you cut that in the Paynesville Press and get it out there a little bit, it would help all of us get board on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Surprise.
I was surprised it took that long, Judy.
Never been quiet in our life.
My name is Judy Colzer, and I live at 319 Stearns Avenue. I've been in town, I graduated from here, I have been in town, I've seen the downtown fail, I've seen what we've got, and you ask, what kind of community are we? And this kind of community that we should be is proactive. We need to have businesses want to come into town. I understand what you're saying about the river, and I get that, but I want to let you know that my husband worked for Cold Spring Granite Company, and they took water from the river. And what he did is he took the stuff out of the water, and he had to test multiple times a day, and that water went back into the river cleaner than it was. But they were also monitored by the EPA, the, Minnesota League. There are all sorts of checks and balances for it. I know I am the minority in this room, but I can't help but think we've got a lot of disinformation. We need to have, next week, to my knowledge, there's going to have, the company is coming into town to ask questions. If you've got legitimate questions and concerns, absolutely. But I don't want to see this become a political or a disagreement and tear the community apart. We're a closed community. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that I live here. I'm proud of the fact that I'm from Paynesville, and I don't want to see this become something that I am no longer proud of.
She can speak.
Go ahead, Doreen.
Doreen Miller, I live at 112 Lake Avenue North, Paynesville. I've lived here my entire life, and I feel that I'm not against green energy at all. I just don't want green energy in my city. They can be out in the country anywhere they want. Some of us were told at one point that there was 100 farmers that were in agreement on this, but no list was given out as to who they were. We attended a meeting last week on Sunday. There was information given, and it's not misinformation, that a lot of farmers don't want this because they're building their own digesters on their own property. They don't need this. They wonder why would they want to haul their stuff or have it hauled away and then have to pay to get it back? And they're only getting back 4%, so they aren't really that interested in it. From what I was told from someone who was there, that was not handing me misinformation. It's someone that deals with the farmers and has talked to a lot of them around the area. So she's right. We don't want this to divide the town, but it possibly could. And I think the biggest reason it could is because you can probably count since, November, how many words have been in the Paynesville press about this particular issue. There were more words recently about, on social media, about the new fire pit in the park than there were about this issue, which is a huge idea. It's huge. But you can't think that if we have this company come in and build outside of city limits, you can't be limited in thinking that that's not going to benefit the town, because it will. You don't know where it will, nobody knows. You can't predict that. But when a business is in the area of a city, that city benefits from that regardless of what you think. So there's a lot of people on both sides of this issue, and I think that it needs to be a lot more transparency coming from the city and the city council. So whether they need to record all of this and take the minutes off of that rather than have someone writing them down and summarizing them, maybe that would be a better way to do it. I don't know. And I don't know if anyone is here from the Paynesville Press tonight, which I think they should have been. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody is here from the press.
Thank you, Doreen. Right, is there anybody else? Otherwise, right. Okay. Let me go through some of the questions, and then we'll turn it back over for some other things here. So I'll just start at the end, just because Doreen's comments were on point. I did speak with Mike Jacobson tonight before the meeting. He's out of town, so he's not able to make it, but he was hoping to be watching the online recording. We are live on YouTube. The joys of living in the United States is we have the First Amendment, where I don't get to tell Mike what he needs to print. I can encourage him and I can ask him to do things, but I can't go next door and hit print on his computer, and thank God for that, because I don't want that power or that ability. So I believe he's either watching now or he plans to be watching. He did convey to me that he's running an article on Nature Energy. He's hoping to have it in next week. Tarek and I sat for an interview, 2 weeks ago now? and he's been waiting to get some information back from Nature Energy, is my understanding. So he's working on that, that is there. I'll announce it again at the end, but since Judy brought it up, there is going to be a public session, Nature Energy, a question and answer session, July 7th at 6 p.m. at the high school auditorium. They just confirmed that either earlier today or yesterday. I believe it was late yesterday. So they just got that worked out within the last 24 hours or so. It's going to be next Friday at 6 p.m. at the high school auditorium. Looking at, the question was brought up a number of times, why don't we do variances instead of looking at a blanket slate? And that is something that the city had done for years, is just blanket sign off on any variance that comes through. And if you look back at all of the variances that the city granted during that time, every single one was preceded by a 5-minute lecture from our city attorney on how we're opening ourselves up to liability because no one can, there's a debate about whether or not they could have passed the test that would require, or that would dictate granting a variance. And that is the unique circumstances of the land. And the city council made it clear when we revised our zoning ordinance that we were going to be following the law when it came to granting variances going forward. That we weren't going to play fast and loose like a number of other cities are, because what happens then is that those cities, they get sued. Like Mr. Bear was talking about, the people who live on the lake get worried because now the zoning regulations are being violated and they're going to bring a lawsuit. So variances are something that the city council said we're not going to deal with. If we need to be more business friendly, we can do that through our zoning ordinance, but we need to strictly adhere to the law. Bill, you look like you were going to correct me, so.
No, I wasn't going to correct you.
Okay.
Just to explain a little bit, I mean, basically on variances, you have to show that there's some circumstance of the land, not your circumstance, not something because of your desire to make more money. It's got to be some unique characteristic of the land that justifies the variance. And there's almost nothing about a bare piece of land that would justify a height variance. I mean, it's just, it's got nothing to do with the land. It's because the person who bought the land wants to build something bigger than is permitted. So you basically, cities that grant height variances would lose every time if they were sued by a neighbor who said, that's not an appropriate variance. They just can't, you can't do it. And I know cities do it all the time. Like I said, Painesville's been doing it for many years. I constantly said, stop doing it. And I think I finally have this council convinced. There'll be another council that'll decide they're going to do it anyway, but that, that's neither here nor there. But I mean, that's always been my advice. Don't do it because most of the time you can't justify it. And that's why. I mean, that's the variance issue. I know people say just do variances, but that's not really right. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to have your zoning ordinance meet the needs of, in your housing districts, meet the needs of housing, in your commercial districts, meet the needs of the people in commercial, and in your industrial districts, meet the needs of the people in industrial. And so, you try your best to do that, and it's imperfect. And, there's always circumstances where people think your zoning ordinance is stupid, but we do our best. So that's why we're here.
The question came up, who went to Denmark? The answer to that from the city are 4 people. One is Chuck DeWolf, the city engineer. He's from Bolton and Menk. Bolton and Menk paid for his transport to and from Denmark along with his lodging while he was there. The other people who went were our city administrator, Tariq Al-Rafai, Councilmember Brick, Councilmember Hersberg. Their housing or their flight and lodging over there was paid out of the Economic Development Fund. That is not strictly taxpayer dollars. Most of that fund is built off of grant money that seeded that account many decades ago, and then the interest that's been repaid from loans that have been given out to businesses over the years. So the council, in making the decision about whether or not to send a delegation over there, said the money, that EDAP fund should pay for that trip because it is looking at business development within town. So that way it's not coming out of our city tax levy, it's not coming off of taxpayer dollars. It came out of there. The question of how involved is the Biden administration, I don't know, you have to ask them. The question was, what are the legal notifications required for a business to go up? There are no legal notifications for the city to notify anyone of business that is going up unless there's something like a conditional use permit that's been applied for. So again, it comes back to the timeline that I set forth a little while ago. If there's a conditional use permit applied for, then all of the homeowners within a certain radius of that property will be notified of the application along with the hearing date. And given something like this, it's going to be broadcast well beyond wherever this is. So no, nobody in that area had been notified yet. No conditional use permit had been applied for. So the legal requirements to send notices would come out once that application is made and the hearing date has been set. It's entirely probable that the application would be made and notices still won't go out for probably 14 to 28 days, just because you have to wait for the planning board to meet in order to set the hearing date. But as soon as they get that hearing date set, then the notifications get mailed out. So if, for example, an application were submitted tomorrow, now we're waiting for the next planning board meeting, which is going to be in July. In July, they'll set a public hearing for their meeting in August, and the notifications will go out right after that planning board meeting in July. So that's where the legal requirements on notification are. Hindsight being 20/20 in this case, I agree that probably should have done something a little bit sooner, but we looked at this and again, we're a good year out from anything breaking ground. And we have been in talks with Nature Energy about doing an open house, about putting all of these things together. Their initial plan was to do something around Town and Country Days. You'll have to ask them why that didn't come together. I don't know. But again, this is a good year out on anything happening, and it's got to work its way through MPCA. There are a lot of unanswered questions that the city can't answer, that hopefully Nature Energy can, and if they can't, then we need to make sure that we get answers before anything's approved. So again, the benefit of hindsight being 20/20, potentially there should have been more, but I also don't think that it's honest for members who have been spreading news about this to indicate that the city council is greenlighting this project and saying we're moving forward on it, and implying that that's going to happen within the next month.
You've been working on this since November, and it's very clear that every single council member.
Hold on, we need to have one person speaking at a time. So right now I'm addressing this. So the council's been meeting with this, the council's been debating and looking at various things. We knew that we'd need public input, and we knew that that process was going to be forthcoming. But this project is still a good, and again, maybe they can pull some hat tricks out of the MPCA and things like that, but I don't realistically see how this could be done any sooner than 8 to 12 months before they would get a green light or even a conditional use permit hearing. If somebody's got better information than that, but that's where I see the projection. So again, this is not something, this is a height ordinance change tonight. The only difference is increasing the height of buildings and increasing the height of silos. There were comments in the letters about steeples and movie theater screens and things like that. None of those things are currently addressed in our ordinance. That part of the ordinance is not changing. The only thing changing in the ordinance are the heights of the buildings. So that is what the Planning Commission is going to be voting on to recommend or not recommend to the council in a few minutes here. So again, the council knew, the council has not been trying to hide information. These meetings have been public where we've talked about them. I know I've written about it in the press a couple of times. Councilmember Brick wrote about it when she returned from Denmark. As for whether or not Mike should have written something more, maybe. Again, I can't force him to write anything unless we're going to pay for front page advertisements and charge that back to the taxpayers. Just look through here. What is our vision for Paynesville? I think Paynesville has long been known as, we just had it 3 weeks ago, Town and Country Days. We are a town and country community, and we need to continue to embrace the urban and rural environment in which we live. And that means working both with those who live in the city, but then also those who live in the township and who live on the lake, or who visit our community, or who farm in our community. And I think that Paynesville, in order to continue to grow, because in our last census, we lost residents, our population went down. In order for us to turn that ship around and continue to grow, we need to present that we are an inviting city. That doesn't mean that we're dumb or that we're naive about things, but businesses need to know that we have a city council that's willing to work with them and come up with reasonable regulations. That doesn't mean signing over blank checks and saying, do whatever you want. But it does mean we need to be able to sit down and have discussions like adults and doing these things together. So right now, we're looking at a change to height variances. And Brad, I'm looking at you, and I'm also going to look at Tarek. I believe AMPI's silos are already at 90 feet.
Or over 80.
Very, very close.
Yeah, they're over 80.
So, I mean, this is not, I mean, that's for the purpose of comparison. They're already there. This is making right what they've already done and letting them continue to grow. We met with them last week. They talked about a number of hypotheticals, sort of their pie-in-the-sky type dreams, and all of those require looking at heights of similar nature. So with the number of people that they employ, they are the third largest employer in the city. That doesn't mean it doesn't come without some headaches from time to time, but they are there, and I believe that this zoning ordinance is appropriate, given everything that we have to do, and again, knowing that there will be ample time for more conversation about nature energy as that process moves forward. This is not the green light to nature energy. This is a proposal to the council and a recommendation to the city council on whether or not we should revise our zoning ordinance as it relates to the height of buildings. So that's all I have. I guess,
Sean, could I just add one thing?
yeah, I was just going to say, I will turn it over to members of the council. I'll start with Hartsmark.
The only thing I can add on that, it's the I-2,
The I-2 zone.
the I-2 zone, which currently is basically what AMPI and,
I believe that's feed.
what?
Fertilizer company?
Yeah, the Cenex, excuse me, the fertilizer.
Cinex and AMPI.
Yep. So this, for those of you who came in, there should be zoning maps back there, so you can see the city zoning. There are two areas. One here, the light green areas are what's going to be affected by this, AMPI, and then this area over here. And if my eyes don't deceive me, if I'm not being colorblind, those are the only two I-2 areas currently in town. Again, I go back to, if we're talking about nature energy, they will have to apply for a rezone, and there will be hearings on that if and when that comes. So, did you have
And
any?
then the only other concern, we do have information on if there would be a spillage and the containment. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Sean, or is that a question for nature when they're here?
I think that's going to be better suited for nature.
But there are plans for containment. It's not going to go to the river unless every single tank leaked at the same time. There was, fire and police, Sean.
Yes.
I was going to address that one.
I'm done.
Right. In terms of police, we're not looking at residential zoning. This is industrial. I think that's an entirely valid question if we were going to be looking at residential, because that absolutely does come with greater density. This is industrial. This is not going to be occupied, lived-in space. As far as fire, I guess I'd turn it over to Brad. Sorry, I'm not trying to put you in Andy's shoes. But because nothing's really dramatically changing, I don't see any reason why our fire department wouldn't be able to meet these needs. So,
I did speak with Andy about this, our fire chief, and he does not see any concern on the height that we're proposing. You know, we do have mutual aid contracts with everybody in Stearns County, basically every department in the state, so if we were to get into trouble, it's not as if we don't have resources very close and are very willing to help us out.
all right, thank you. Right, I'll turn back to the council, and the reason why I'm kind of ignoring planning, it's not because I'm trying to be rude, but we're going to turn it back over to y'all's meeting here in a few minutes, and then Gene gets to control you, and you guys get to speak your minds for as long or as little as you want. So, Megan, did you have anything?
I just wanted to add as what Brad was saying, because there seemed to be a lot of questions about the fire. Yeah, I don't know if it's a hint that this mic is off, but. Don't worry, thank you. So, there seems to be, I've heard a lot of questions about ladder trucks and things like that and requirements for height. Since, I mean, the tallest ladder truck in North America, it is not in the US, it's in Canada, is 230 feet tall and probably costs $6 gazillion. But that is the tallest ladder truck in North America. The tallest building in Minneapolis is 792 feet tall, just in Minneapolis. So there is not a requirement for ladder truck height versus height in the city and things like that, because there are thousands of buildings all over the world that are higher than the highest ladder trucks that are made. So that isn't, I've heard that a lot, and I just wanted to clarify that. And also, I think there's been a lot of talk about location of businesses and things like that. And, you know, we are just talking about the height right now, but I think something that I did not understand as well as I do now before I was on the council is that so many of these things involve sales of private property that we have no say over really of any sort. And I think, you know, it's, you think before you have to be involved in it, you think it's like with the model railroad, you know, you can just put something here, you can just put something there, and houses would look great here, and sure they would, you know, but in the real world, people have property and they can sell it to who they like, and they can choose to build what they want there as far as it, you know, goes with ordinances and outside boards and things like that. So I think there are certain industries that require city water versus building a well, and I think that's a main difference as to why certain industries might look at township versus city as well. So that's kind of all I have, since we're just talking about the height right now.
Paul, anything on height?
Yeah, I believe this is the step that is a slow first step to see where we go with this. So it's just with patience, and we'll be able to have more meetings such as this to inform not only ourselves but the public, at least to give them a better feel of what's going on, because to tell you the truth, we don't know a whole lot more than what you know right now. A lot of these things are proprietary information with the other businesses.
I gotta stop, Paul, you've said that online as well. I've not been told anything by Nature Energy that's proprietary.
Well, I'm saying that we just can't go out and speculate.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. Okay, and where the speculation is just not gonna help anything anywhere. So I believe that's just, this is the first step into going in a direction, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, I have, right, those are our comments, I think, as a council on the need for the variance. Our order of business here is that if there's any follow-up comments or questions from anybody in the public who might want to say anything more, we've got about 10 minutes for that. I think, given the number of people here, we can be flexible. I don't think we're running the risk of going until 3 in the morning. So if anybody wants to, anybody who spoke already wants to add anything or say anything in response, I'm certainly willing to open it up. Mr. Hoppy. I need you to go to the podium. I'm sorry.
Should have sat over there. It's closer.
I'm not trying to be rude. We just need to make sure we hear you.
I might have missed it at the beginning, but what was the height that they're proposing to increase it to, or just remove it altogether?
Yeah, so the proposal is for building structures, it would go from 45 to 75 feet. Silos would be going up to 100 feet.
From 80 feet.
From 80 to 100.
In industrial zones only.
Yeah, in the industrial 2 zone only.
Okay.
So not citywide, not residential, just the 2 spots that are currently I-2 is where that would be changing. Yep, go ahead.
So on that height, how does it affect the airport height limits? Because I was told in 2003 I couldn't put up any tower more than 45 feet out in an industrial loop because of the airport. And the height limit there is 90. Yet across the street from me was a 180-foot tower. AT&T tower on Lewis's property, which is now taken down, which didn't have any lights on it or a permit. So as far as ordinances go, I guess what's so 100 foot is lower than what the Nature Energy would be requiring, correct?
No.
Oh, it's not? No. What's the height that they're requiring?
What are their buildings?
The building height, the maximum building height they would have, I think, is 65 feet or something like that, building-wise, but then they'll have a stack, and that'll be the highest component.
Oh, so what are the stacks?
The stack has to go by the EPA regulations, because that's where they look at the proximity to people versus how high it needs to go. So I don't think that they have, their plants, they had all different stacks. It just depended on what regulations. So I assume until they have a piece of property purchased and they get that in writing what they need to have, we won't know the exact height.
They were telling us that they typically build them shorter than they are, not
Longer, taller.
Taller, no. In Denmark and in other countries, they're lower, but here the requirements are that they need to be higher. So that's something that they need to work out with the EPA. And as far as I know, the FAA doesn't have any issue with the height.
Yeah, I would never dare speak for the FAA
Right.
or any federal organization on anything.
Right, so they say 10 feet or 100 feet every 10 feet, or 1 foot every 100 feet you are from the airport. So out there, it's about 90 feet max height, where Lewis is.
Well, I,
Much higher, I think, but, because we did look at it briefly, but we didn't,
I guess that was in 2003, I think they maybe changed the
Yeah.
airport direction since then, so it's maybe a
I mean,
little...
they would need to get the okay from the FAA, but as far as I know, I don't think it'll be an issue.
No, coming back to conditional use permit, so if there, is it required to have a conditional use permit for safety and possible pollution reasons, explosion hazards, neighboring properties?
yeah, so the conditional use permit process is a requirement under our zoning ordinance for a business like that to operate. And as part of what we would be looking at as the city for conditions would be the things that we and our residents are concerned with, and making sure that there are contingency plans in place. I will not presume that I have a PhD in anything and that I'm qualified to speak on what Nature Energy should do for a contingency plan in case a tornado comes through.
Right.
But just taking a look and looking at probably what has the MPCA found and recommended, once they do their stuff, I suspect that most of what we do here is going to be affirming that they stick to the MPCA recommendations. And again, this is just me trying to foresee the future. I'm not a prognosticator, but I'll do my best. And, but really, probably more so on a local level, we would be looking at ensuring that they abide by MPCA, and then looking at things like traffic control and things of that nature to make sure that the trucks that are coming through aren't going to be routing through downtown, that we can put up different streets to keep them out in that area, which would be safer for them and safer for our residents.
Right. And so as far as pollution, what do they say, 90 to 100 trucks a day?
Yeah, it's going to depend on what the
Right.
farmers and
So,
stuff are, but.
Diesel trucks, 100 trucks, extra.
45.
Sitting around town waiting to load is a lot of extra diesel exhaust too.
They're not waiting around town, they're in and out.
Right, but they're still driving in and out of town. Parked, they're loading and going. Right.
Right.
Can I add something about the FAA?
Well,
I asked about it at last council meeting.
okay.
So I did ask that at the last, I'm loud enough. I did ask about that at the last council meeting, about that, and again, we didn't have anyone, obviously, from the FAA here, but Ron Mergen and Chuck DeWolf, who work with that sort of thing more often, said that they would not have to, it wouldn't affect the airport at all. Again, you know, as far as they know, but it has been a question that's been asked, and I'm sure we'd have to clear it with everybody, but that there wouldn't need to be reroutes or anything like that.
How is it expected to affect the property values of the whole town and all the properties in town? Because if it decreases everyone's property value by 5%, you know, because of its proximity, that's a huge amount of loss to the community's revenue also.
Yeah, so right now, again, we're just looking at the zoning ordinance, so answering it for that, we're not expanding beyond what we already have in place. If there's a question about property ordinance when it comes to Nature Energy, I don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody can tell you that. and anybody who gives you an answer is just making it up. Because I'd like to see whatever documentation they have to support it. I don't know how you could realistically ever extrapolate that, so.
Winona's got a plan, so supposedly, right?
They don't.
I think Winona
Nope.
is online, or they're thinking about getting one.
So,
No, they don't have one.
no. So-
That's speculation.
All right, anything else on the height ordinance? All right, I'm not seeing anything. I will close our public hearing and turn the gavel back over to Gene, who hits it much more harder than I do.
I like the power once in a while. Okay, as a planning commission, then we will each now have a chance to ask questions or make comments. And since Katie's chomping at the bit to make a comment or two, we'll start with her.
So, we didn't ask the city council to join us in the planning meeting. It was decided at a city council meeting that they were going to come and set the story straight, and we were never asked as a planning board if we cared. It was just decided for us. And Jean's sister's up here smirking, thinks it's funny. Just like you were smirking when other people were talking about things that they really cared about. It's not appropriate. It's not
All right,
appropriate.
so I'm going to chime in. I know this is Gene's meeting, but ad hominem attacks are not going to get us anywhere, personal attacks, and I'm saying that members of the council, members of the board, members of the audience, these topics, I've said it at council meetings before, we get to the heart of people's lives and what they care about, and if we can't have conversations where we treat each other with respect, then we shouldn't bother having them at all. So I'm just going to throw that comment out there, and then I'll shut up and turn it back over
Well,
to Gene.
and as the chairman of this committee and on the council, the committees are not asked if they want to participate. They are directed by the council to follow what the guidelines are and what we ask them to do. We ask for recommendations. We don't tell them they have to give us a yes answer. We just ask for their information and their recommendation. So as far as, but that's what our goal is here, is we directed the planning commission to hold this hearing because we wanted to make a variance change, or not a variance, an ordinance change, zoning ordinance. And that's what our job is as a planning commission. So do you have more, Katie, to add, I'm sure?
Yes, so I came to Fayetteville because there was a hospital, there was assisted living, there was a nursing home, a grocery store, a fleet supply, and the highway went around the city, so it created a safe community that I could live in and bike in, and my kids could play and grow up the way kids should grow up, playing outside. I looked forward to being a part of a community, a small community, and for about an entire year, I drove back and forth between St. Cloud and Paynesville to bring my kids to school, to make sure they had a better school. Paynesville has the best school in a 30-mile radius of St. Cloud. Once we closed on the house, I found out, oh yes, I'm gonna bring up chickens, that even though this is a rural community, we couldn't have chickens. And I wrote an extensive ordinance that would protect chicken owners and chicken haters alike. It was a compromise, and I have nearly an acre, and I thought, you know, chickens based on the size of a lot was fair. Jean told me, you can't work against the council, you have to work with them. So I did. I requested a group committee to come to a compromise, to work together. I had Pollyannish ideas of good people coming to compromise. Nothing happened. Two years go by after it was tabled for 2 years by Neil. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Neil tried to table it for 4 years.
So the council tabled it.
Yeah.
And it's important to note, the council makes decisions as a group. Not any one member acts alone. I don't have any executive authority, neither does.
He made a motion. Thank you for mansplaining me. It's great. So there is a reason why City Hall has a double standard sign coming in. Passing items while the larger community is unaware is easy. It's very, very easy. Backroom conversations to get what you want, if you're the right person, is very easy. Chickens came up again when Neil and the mayor and Tarek had a meeting, and then it was brought before City Council, and it was it tabled for 2 more years, Mr. Mayor?
Was.
And it was an ordinance that I wrote, and the community at large was not invited to participate. So backroom conversations to get what you want, if you are the right person, is super easy. If you vote yes today on this, you're participating in a subdivision of democracy. In private, this is absolutely for Nature Energy, who will need 197 plus or minus, for their stack. Where that comes into play is because under section 2.5A, there is the little word not. It says chimneys, air conditioning, blah, 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 steeples and mechanical appurtenances pertaining to and necessary to the permitted use of a district in which they are located shall not be included in calculating the height of the principal structure or subject to the height limitations set forth in 3 above. 3 above is 75 feet for roofs, and storage silos are 100 feet. So if we pass this as it is written, anybody can do what they want when it comes
Excuse me, Katie.
to items under A.
But that item, that paragraph you read, that's already in the ordinance. That is already there. This is not something new. The only thing that's new is the height measurements. The building and
So
the
if we
silo.
vote yes,
That is already there.
so if we vote yes,
We can vote no and it's still there. It just means our heights stay at 45 and set 65, 75, whatever the height is.
but we're voting on the entire ordinance, not just the height.
No, we're voting on an amendment to the height of the ordinance. That part is already in there and will stay there, unless we totally change the whole ordinance.
And the city council can make variances.
Yes.
We don't need to change the ordinance. And if we don't change the ordinance, if we change the ordinance, it's going to be really easy. It's going to be less work for the city, and they don't have to provide a variance. So if you went to architecture school and design school, and you're in the construction industry, and you know about community development, you know that the only things that should really be above the treetops should be church steeples and major institutions. Those are the things that should be above the tree line, if you're looking at it from a design perspective. And we should not give a blank check for people to just build as high as they want, and we should vote no. Because this is absolutely about Nature Energy.
Okay. Josh, do you have anything that you need to comment on?
I'll just say, there's a lot of things being said. As far as the ordinance goes, which we're talking about today, I guess I'm okay with changing the height. But all this other stuff, definitely has to be talked about at a different time. So as far as the ordinance goes, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Jacob?
I'm just looking at it, I've done my research, I've talked with some residents in the area. Just want to remind everyone again, just like Councilwoman Soini said, that we're recommending recommendation to the council. The council's having the heavy lifting piece. I don't envy them and their decision. And at the end of the day, there's no yellow button. It's either red for no and green for yes. We're a volunteer committee. We kind of have to give the recommendation here. So it just at the end of the time, there has to be a decision that needs to be made, and that there is still comments that can be brought forth if need be. So that's all I have. at this point.
Randy? Nothing more? Okay. With those comments and things, I will proceed with our vote on the recommendation.
Can I say something first
Yes, you
in
may.
response to Katie?
Yes.
Katie, you mentioned something about the hospital and how it's important to the community, and I would agree with you on that. But you didn't seem to support the hospital when they wanted to have a public hearing, you voted no.
Again, I don't want to get into ad hominem attacks here or anything like that. We can keep this about the issue going forward. I will say, Gene, if you would entertain me for 30 seconds.
Yep.
The meeting that was had between myself, Tarek, and Councilmember Hertzberg on chickens was our Policies and Procedures Committee meeting. It was a published meeting where the agenda had been made public. The minutes of that were approved by the council, and then it came before the council at an open, public, published meeting. So this backdoor stuff, it does not happen the way that it's been perceived. And I get it, like, if there's that impression, it's out there, but it doesn't happen. I mean, I can show you the meeting minutes, and I can show you where the agenda was published. So that's all I have. Thank you, Gene.
Yep. Okay, then we will have the report and recommendation of the planning board on the proposed amendment of zoning ordinance. The governing body of the city of Painesville has initiated a proposed amendment to City Code Chapter 36 entitled zoning, which would amend section 36 through 39 entitled I-2 Heavy Industrial District, changing the maximum building height from 45 feet to 75 feet, and the maximum height for storage silos from 90 feet to 100 feet. And adding a new section incorporating provisions for Chapter 36.5 entitled Height and Yard Exceptions, and 1 and 2 of those height and yard exceptions directly into Chapter 36 through 49, in relevant part for ease of access. And that's what I was referring to Katie. This is already in the ordinance, it's just being shifted so it's easier to find. Whereas as amended to City Code 36, Section 36 through 49 has been prepared and forwarded to the planning board for its review, report, and recommendation to the council. Whereas a public hearing was held before a joint meeting of the planning board and city council on June 29th, 2023 at 6:05 p.m. to hear public comment on the proposed amendment to I-2 Heavy Industrial District zoning. And whereas the planning board considered public comment on the proposed changes, the purpose of the proposed changes, public safety and needs for industrial development within the city, community, and based thereon upon the following recommendation. The planning board recommends that the amendment to the zoning ordinance amending Chapter 36 entitled Zoning at Section 36 to 49 entitled I-2 Heavy Industrial District, and specifically amending entitled Lot, Yard, Area, and Height Requirements at Section 36 to 39, 3, C3, entitled Building Height, amending the maximum height structures from 45 feet to 75 feet, and amending the maximum height of storage silos from 90 feet to 100 feet, and further amending Section 36 to 49 by adding number 5, entitled Height and Yard Exceptions, should be. We'll take the vote now. Katie? On the amendment?
Madam Chair, point of,
Yes?
so we're doing roll call voting? Is that?
I don't think you have a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
May I make a motion?
You may.
I move to table all issues regarding ordinance changes that will pertain as a benefit to Nature Energy to be tabled for 2 years until the community can do a comp plan where the community can come together and determine a plan forward for the community of Painesville and development. Sarah,
Distance benefit.
Yeah.
No, seriously, can you get her to repeat that?
Okay. Would you repeat that for the secretary taking the minutes? It's a long amendment.
It is, I'm sorry. I move to table all issues and ordinance changes that will pertain to or benefit Nature Energy until we come to a comp plan where the community can determine a plan forward for the community of Painesville and what we want to be for the future.
Is there a second from anybody? Hearing no second, the motion dies. Would somebody like to make a motion on our action sheet? No, not that one. Yeah. No, no, we have to vote before we deny her. Yeah, we have to have a vote before we make a motion. He was wrong for once.
It's happened a couple times.
Yeah. All right. If we don't want to, you don't want to do a roll call vote, you'd rather do a yes or no? Yay, nay?
I'd say my thought would be like we do normal meetings,
We usually,
yea or nay motion.
okay. All those in favor? A?
Madam Chair, just a
Yeah.
personal point,
Yep.
in, just to be clarification, so their motion was made on the stated thing that you mentioned.
No. The motion we will be making is whether to grant or deny the grant, approve or deny the recommendation to council for this ordinance change.
So that motion has been made.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
No, it has not.
Can I?
Yep.
I think what I'm understanding is that Jean's just looking for a consensus on where the planning board is at so that she can fill in the recommendation sheet and then a formal motion to be made on adopting that recommendation. That's my
Yeah.
2 cents from this side.
Well, sometimes I don't do it very good. Anyway, we have to vote whether we're going to approve or deny, and then the motion has to be made.
And that's the height ordinance.
Right, the height ordinance.
It doesn't have to do with,
No, it's the I-2 industrial height ordinance for buildings and silos.
okay.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1. All right, the motion is on our action sheet. A motion to approve or deny the amendments to, no, that's not what they want. Okay, yeah, I do. Chapter 36, section 3649 regarding I-2 height requirements and recommend such to the city council.
I'll make that motion.
Josh made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Jacob, second. That was you, right, Jacob? Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. That passed 4-1. We will recommend to council. They can go from there. That's it for our business for tonight, so we are adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
Sean, I would like to make a comment before this meeting ends.
Yeah.
I find it
Meeting's adjourned.
appalling that we
Adjourned.
sat here and watched our council members on this end of the table sit here and go like this when she was speaking. Now this was right after you said that we need
Cody.
to have this meeting to be polite, and because she made a comment about Jean's sister. No, you just totally lost all credibility. I can't believe he said
But it's
that.
okay for her
Hold on.
I can't
But wait a minute.
Hold on, I just want to stop. I didn't see anything.
I didn't see
Otherwise, I
That's
would,
what I'm telling you about it.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
'cause
you telling me.
We can't see
So,
from this end.
Can you-
I understand that.
Thank you.
yeah,
You cannot write one person on board. I don't, that's up to you guys, and you have that right.
okay,
But for
so,
him to sit there and mock her, and he's doing this, and he's doing 4 years, and he's doing this,
So,
that's
hold-
uncalled for. He needs to apologize to her for that.
hold on. I didn't see anything. I would like to know more about it,
I
because
just told
if
you
it happened,
everything about- Anybody else want to comment on that, what they saw? You saw what your husband did, I'm sure.
I
Hold on.
absolutely did, but then she gets to sit there and deface somebody sitting in the audience too, and call them names.
I
and-
just said.
Yeah, but that's not
She
right.
did.
No, she can't sit up there as part of a council and talk badly about somebody in the community. like she does all the time on Facebook. I mean, that's just horrible.
But he can.
No, I'm saying he shouldn't be doing that either. I do not like it as well.
Exactly. I don't like
but-
when anybody does that, because